All right, Jerry, obviously the security product is what we're here to talk about, and that could go off in a couple different directions. You know, there's a lot of history there with you in this music. Besides the obvious thing, which, you know, the idea is to play the music of Peter Gabriel, you know, what is really the concept, you know, of this band?
Other than the music of Peter Gabriel?
I mean, why do it, and what kind of approach are you guys taking? Because I know you're not playing the entire catalog. You know, you're focusing on a certain thing.
Well, the whole thing really started out performing the music of Peter's that was kind of back when I was playing with Peter. And we were avoiding, to a large degree, we were avoiding the music that Peter is, when he does tour, he still plays. We didn't want to do that. And like, you know, there's a lot of great music in those first four records, previous to So, and the Security record in you know, specifically the Security record is an absolutely phenomenal record, musically, sonically, you know, everything about it. It's a classic record. It's brilliant. So, and those songs were not, you know, when Peter hit with So and Sledgehammer and Big Time, you know, I think if you could probably you know, relate that the audience changed.
Yeah.
You know, when I was playing with them, we're playing theaters, you know, a couple thousand people. You know, he after So he was playing probably anywhere from a big arena to a stadium, and those were not necessarily fans of DIY, Not One of Us, More
Right.
Above the Burgermeister, you know what I'm saying? Family in the Fishing Net. You know, these are unusual pieces of music. They're different to Sledgehammer and Big Time and Don't Give Up and In Your Eyes. So I didn't particularly want to do it. I had been approached about, somebody had the idea that they thought it would be a great thing to do. I didn't really want to do it initially. But then they were persistent. And the thing that got me was they came back to me and said, well, we spoke to Trey Gunn and he said, if you do it, he'll do it. He's interested if you're doing it. And that was the real hook for me. I mean, because I had worked with Trey on various things with Robert Fripp. And I'm a huge Trey fan and a supporter. Trey. I think he's brilliant. Really brilliant. So that initially got me, you know, to consider it. You know, it was something I had done so long ago. It was like being married to someone and then 30 years later marrying them again. I guess, I don't know. It's just, I just, you know, I don't listen to that music. You know, most of anything I do, once I'm done, when I've done it, I don't go back and listen to it really, you know, for my enjoyment. Plus, I'm working a lot. I'm playing on new thing. I'm, you know, the time I have to go and sit back and listen to music for enjoyment that's a narrow window, and I don't tend to go back and listen to things that I did, you know. So that's the way it got off. It started off like that, and was interesting because once I started listening to the music and having to learn it again, and then once we started playing it, it was pretty powerful. It was pretty powerful because that period of time for me working with Peter had a real profound effect on me as a musician. You know, prior to that, I grew up on Motown, R&B, black music. You know, if it wasn't black, you know, I wasn't that into it. And then I joined a band in 1975 called Orleans.
Right.
And they were like kind of, unlike the hits that people know them for, they were like an incredibly intense, awesome. I was a huge fan. I was a huge Orleans fan before I joined them. and I'd seen them play. I would go out and hear them. They were like an awesome band. So I got an opportunity to join, very different than Peter Gabriel. Um, and the lead guy in Orleans quit the band in '77. I was heartbroken, and somehow somebody handed me this cassette tape. Back then, cassette tapes were of Peter's first record, and said, "This guy's looking for a drummer. He needs a drummer." And I think it might have been maybe between my older brother, who's also a very successful drummer, and also very good friends with Tony Levin back then, worked with Tony a lot, and then and I just kind of somehow I ended up. I listened to the tape. It was strange music, nothing like I have ever heard. I didn't know who Peter Gabriel was. I didn't know who Genesis were. They weren't the Doobie Brothers. They weren't Little Feat. They weren't the Temptations or Motown, or that music was not that was not my sensibility. But because I was a guy who was raised a certain way, in a very kind of sort of semi-progressive liberal, I listened to it and I thought, this is very unusual. It's not, Moribund the Burgermeister. I don't know how much of a fan of Peter's you are, or how much.
Yeah, no, I know all the records. Yeah.
When you listen to Moribund the Burgermeister or Excuse Me,
right.
Waiting for the Big One was a blues, but it was just so it was so out there. And I thought, yeah, this is a challenge. I mean, I'm not getting goosebumps here listening to this, but it's interesting. It's different. It's a job, because my band had just broken up, and it was going to Europe, starting in England. Like, I'd never been there. I mean, I was like maybe 21. And I was about 18, I think, when I joined Orleans. And I been in another band before Orleans that had a record on CBS, and we were touring, and so by the time I was 21, I had already been around a couple times. So but the Peter thing was just so unusual, and it was a little bit of a challenge. It would paid pretty well, and it was traveling, going to Europe. I didn't see a downside, so I did it. I didn't think it would turn into like a 10-year. I guess I didn't know what to make of it. It went 10 years anyway. So and really the Security record was kind of the last record I was very completely and totally involved and immersed in.
Yeah.
So there was a different scenario.
Yeah.
Basically had to do with scheduling, and I scheduled Peter's record and then Paul McCartney's record to do them. And then Peter changed his schedule at the last minute, and it had to be the same time as Paul. And I didn't feel like I could, not for any real reason other than I felt like they were counting on me to do the Paul thing. And so I ended up working on Paul's record, and it was in England. So I would drive to Peter's, where Peter was recording at his place, when I was free on weekends or whatever. And I did some work on the Soul record, but I wasn't there throughout the whole process. Anyway, I hope that somewhere in there was an answer to your question.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned Robert Fripp, and I'm interested, both Fripp and Peter Gabriel are very, unique people, to say the least. Their reputations are not as being the easiest guys to work for. They know what they want. And, so especially as a younger guy, an American coming into the situation, working with these British people and these the way I picture Robert Fripp is impossible to work with. Maybe that's not true. But besides being, good on your instrument and being able to play, what are some things, like traits you needed to be able to, adapt to working with and, for people like Peter and Fripp and whatnot?
Well, first of all, both very easy to work with. Second of all, of course, as you may surmise, I had no idea who Robert Fripp was. I didn't know King Crimson. I didn't know, but um, Peter he's such a wonderful person, The toughest thing about Peter is like he knows what he doesn't want.
Mm.
And he's searching for what he wants, but I don't remember, and maybe, someday it would be great to have this conversation with Peter and Tony and David and Larry. Larry and Tony were there for the very first record. I came in to tour after the first record. He needed a band. Larry Fast and Tony Levin remained in that band. The guys that played on that first record, back in those days, record companies would pay for a promo tour, like 3 weeks, big cities, blah blah blah, to launch something. And the guys that were on the record, the first record, that was the band. After that was over, I think the pay scale changed pretty dramatically, and those other guys were busy, like session guys. The drummer Alan Schwartzberg, Jimmy Malin, percussionist, Steve Hunter he was playing with Alice Cooper. I think they all had other jobs, but that's when I came into play. And Peter the first thing we did was rehearse to go out and tour. Peter was great, easy, really, really easy going, easy to work with. I mean, I never remember Peter telling anybody specifically what to do back in the I rehearsed with Peter for the tour. Then I was telling you, Tony was playing this unusual instrument, Chapman stick.
Right.
Peter's idea was one day he bought thimbles, like a seamstress them. He thought, "Oh, Tony, why don't you try playing with thimbles on your fingers?" Like Peter's very smart like that, and I mean that's a simple example, but he knows what he had a vision, but he wasn't an orchestrator. He wasn't writing out, he had a vision. He just, and we would work it out very much, like when a band gets together and they play and they're committed to one another and they bounce off of each other. It wasn't like his first solo record where they were all hired guys, they went. So, but Peter was easy. He was easy to work with in the studio, easy to work with live, great performer. Just, it just blew my mind. I mean, he was very theatrical, but he wrote great songs, and I don't know. That's Peter. Now, did you want to know about Robert?
Well, yeah, because he's even more mysterious, I think, from an outsider's point of view.
Back then, super mysterious. And everybody was talking about Robert Fripp, like, "Oh, Robert, don't look him in the eyes. Don't look up. Don't call him Robert." Nobody literally said that, but you know what I mean? It was that feeling of, he's just spent a year digging ditches or something, like some kind of strange stuff about Robert. I mean, so the first time I think I met Robert, we started recording that second record, which Robert produced at a studio in Holland, in a country residential studio. The Genesis had done a record there, and then we went in and we and that's the first time I met Robert. So I had heard all this stuff about Robert. So the first day we're in the studio setting up everything, and we're getting set up, and we did a little bit of playing, banging around to get sounds and stuff. And then Robert he didn't really say too much, he was kind of to himself. But when we were done, he came up to me and he said, Jerry, would you stay after the session? When we're done, would you stay here? Stay. So I thought, okay, I'm done. I'm fired. I'm going home, and his guy he likes is going to be gone. So everybody leaves. I go into Robert's in the control room. I walk into the control room. It's Robert, the engineer, and he has those two Revox tape machines, which there's been people call them known as Frippertronics.
Right.
With the take up reel, the feed, you connected to, and he's there, and he said, "Oh, well, he said, sit down, just sit down." So I sat down on the couch, and he proceeded to play and do like a Frippertronics piece, which I figured after that was over and I left, and that was pretty much, that was about it. I realized, I think that's his way of saying welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I like you. I don't know, maybe not, but that's the way he was. I mean, he shared that experience with, I'm guessing that there were a lot of people out there that were followers that would give anything to be in a room like right there while he's doing it, And I sat there and I listened to it. It was awesome, it was impressive, beautiful. And then we went on to work on that record, some of it. Then we eventually went to New York, to the Hit Factory, and did like the second half of that record was recorded in New York. And at that point it was pretty established, we there was the band for the most part, and we just we became friends. Robert was very easy. I'll give you an example. We were in London, and now we have kind of a relationship where we're friends, and we've done a little bit of playing together, and he was working on a record of his that he was doing called Exposure. That was a record called Exposure. So I came into the studio in London. He was there, and I had my drums all set up and everything. And he said, "Jerry, just go in there and play any beat that you want. Play whatever, anything that you want." So he had either, I can't remember if he was doing it on the fly or if he had already done something and he wanted to add drums to it. So I went in, put a headphone, I'm listening to like a Frippertronics thing. There's really I don't hear any pattern or rhythm. And I just started doing what I do, pounding on the drums. And I have to say that I think part of what those guys like Peter and Robert liked about me is I didn't play like Bill Bruford or Phil Collins, or I didn't come from a sort of I don't want to say jazz, because when I was a kid I really was into jazz, but that fusion is, my brother was a session drummer in New York, and I learned from him. You play like you're making records, man. You're making pop records, hit records, rock records. You're not all over the place. It's not progressive. It's like you come up, you hit. It's like nowadays they call them loops. It's like looping, drum loop. I play like that, and I think that's what both Robert and Peter really liked, was I wasn't playing all kinds of busy stuff and fills and whatnot. And in fact, Robert he nicknamed me Fat Ape on drums, and I was not back then I was not fat by any means. I was actually very thin, but that's how he described me, because I would pound the drums, and repetitive pounding. So in my experience, both Robert and Peter were very, very easy to work with. And their thing was, if they liked you and they liked the way you approach things, that's all they needed to know. They didn't need to tell you, what to do or how to do it.
Right.
With Peter, it was very interesting because he'd have ideas about, I don't really want like a typical traditional drum beat. Like, what can we do? Like, we'll put we'll take the cymbals away, and then we'll put an oil can and another thing, and you know, just just try to create rhythms a little more kind of I would say little either between Middle Eastern and African, you know. But that was the thing where we would just experiment and try different things, and that changed my style dramatically. I mean, my approach, which is now I can do both. I mean, I love funk and R&B, but I also love that, which is partially what the appeal is of being in the security project, because we're doing Family in the Fishnet, we're doing Wallflower, we're doing San Jacinto, we're doing what are the other ones that are like, I call them the epics.
Yeah.
One that's a little different, but I'm so happy I had suggested, I think for the last tour that we did, Slow Burn from the first record.
Yeah.
And if you know the piece, it's progressive in the sense that it goes through different changes. It's not like I Have the Touch is, I think, what everyone thought was going to be his breakout, because it was a funky pop kind of dance record. But Slow Burn, you know, it just goes through this whole it's like a journey, you know, starting, stopping, slow, big, stop, hit, you know. And we just I just watched a video of it recently of us from last tour, and it's just fantastic. And the band, Trey, Michael Kotze's guitar player, David Jemison is the keyboard player, and has as you can imagine, has an absolute, you know, it's like an albatross of work that's on his shoulders. I mean, he really makes it sound like the records, because that's what he does. He gets samples, he tries to recreate the sounds of the record. I don't, per se. Trey, no, you know, Trey and I come from a different background, like where we've done a lot more original material. David Jemison he's not really even a professional musician per se. Like he doesn't come from a background all his life of playing bands and blah blah blah. But he's fantastic. You know, he's the perfect guy for this band. And Michael Kotze, the guitar player, Trey knew him from living in Seattle, and he's like a brilliant guitar player, and knows how to kind of listen. Guitar is very complicated on Peter's records, because I don't think he loves guitar, you know. Just like I don't think he loves drums, traditional drums per se. But guitar it's complicated. David Rhodes is an amazing guitar player that you know, he comes up with these unusual, very kind of English in his approach, playing little two-string, you know, parts, not playing big chords and blah blah blah. So, and then we right now this time around, we have Happy Rhodes as the singer, which we've done at least we've done a tour or two or with Happy in the past, and she's the third singer that we've had. The first two singers were like, the first guy was in a Gabriel tribute band, so he knew the thing and knew how to move like Peter and sing, and you know, he put the monkey makeup on and whatnot. So and then we had a guy from Liverpool, Brian Cummins. Josh Gleason was the first singer, really great guy, great singer. He had a young family, little kids and a wife, and a very good job. He couldn't, this was like a hobby. He couldn't play, he couldn't go out and play, you know, very much. Brian Cummins was a guy, David Jemison found him on YouTube. He's from Liverpool, and he has a Genesis tribute band, and called the Carpet Crawlers, and he's a Gabriel fanatic. He sounds just like Peter. He's great. But we did well with him, but I knew that was not going. He was not going to be the guy. You know, he's got too many things going on his own, and you know, so Trey and I had both worked with Happy Rhodes in the past on one of her records. And I think she's got 11 or 12 records out. So I love the idea of having a woman to, you know, that it's not a tribute band per se.
Right.
And it's not exactly like we're not trying to recreate the records. Pete, and Close Your Eyes and it sounds like Peter. Happy is obviously not that. So I love that. I love it. And I think the people that come to the shows, if they're people have said they were skeptical, but they came, they weren't sure. And then at the end, they were like, wow. I mean, I just wasn't sure what to expect, but I was blown away. It's just what it is. It's the music, the songs, the lyrics, the melody, everything. It's just Happy's just doesn't sound like Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
And so that's sorry. I obviously, as you can tell, I'm either a great person to interview or terrible because
No, it's great.
I can talk and talk and talk.
My next question was, tell me about the members of the band, so I don't have to ask it now. You know,
Well,
you skipped ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
In addition, you know, to the security project, I know you have a lot going on. You have the studio, Dreamland. You still work with Tony Levin. Just briefly, could you just give me like a quick kind of rundown of what else you have going on right now?
Well, I have a band that I do with my brother called the Marotta Brothers. And he's on Martha's Vineyard all summer. So about 4 years ago, I talked him into doing that. So we get to play together, my brother and I. And that gives us an opportunity to go back to arguing and yelling at each other and wrestling with each other like we were when we were kids. Although he always won because he's 8 years older than me. And then I have this band called Reelin' in the Years, which is the music of Steely Dan, which is absolutely phenomenal. And David Jemison, the keyboard player in the Security Project, is also the keyboard player in that band. And we gig around a lot as much as we can, and people love it. I mean, it's incredibly popular. It's incredibly popular. Like, yeah, people love Steely Dan. and then I do a lot of recording and producing. I produced a woman named Sarah Parada, and there's a record called Blue to Gold that's just been released. I'm working on a kids record with a woman. They're all like Hawaiian kind of kids songs, and she plays ukulele. And then I'm working with a great singer-songwriter named Ruth Michael Keene. That's been going on. I just finished a week of like performances in New York City for backers for a potential Broadway show with a guy named Anthony Rapp. Anthony Rapp was one of the stars of the show Rent, from the original stars, and he's written a one-man show about that whole story of him getting the job. Jonathan Larson, who wrote the show, and then died like the day they were opening on Broadway, and Anthony's mother got sick and passed away through those. So he's written this beautiful story. Now he's on Star Trek. He's on the show Star Trek. He's an actor, does Broadway and television and blah blah blah. So we do this occasionally when he's not busy. I mean,
right.
We get together and we do shows. And in his show, he's gotten permission to use some of the music from Rent, which is like phenomenal, great music. And I'm doing this. I'm working on. I have a group called Fragile Fate with Rupert Greenell, who's a keyboard player from England. He's in a band called The Fix, and Eric Taylor, who's a friend of ours who lives in Rochester, who's just a great musician. Tony, we did a thing called the Bucket List with Phil Keaggy,
Yeah.
Tony and Phil and I. That's awesome. I always hope that one day we'll more than anything, more than recording, I just hope we could get together and go out and play some shows. Yeah, I mean, I'm forgetting, I'm very forgetful. I'm doing a show with a guy named Marshall Crenshaw, who I
Yeah.
had done a record with long ago. We're doing a show at Levon Helms,
Oh, great.
which is here. Oh, well, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Let
was
me
up
know when
there.
you come up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great spot.
We're doing a thing at Levon's in June.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I work in the, I can't leave them out. I play in a band called Annie and the Hedonists. 5 people. We do a lot of swing dances. It's all music like from the early 1900s, like Sister Rosetta Tharpe,
Wow.
Sippy Wallace, the Billie Holiday, blah blah. It's a great band, phenomenal band, and Annie Rosen is the lead singer. She's incredible. Yeah, we play we play around as much as we can. Those guys are either working or retired. They're not. It's not like a rock and roll thing,
Yeah.
But it's so much fun. I love playing with those guys. The music's fantastic. Laverne Baker, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of like historic. They're musicologists, those guys. So
Yeah.
they really dig out like these offbeat songs, that not everybody knows but are classic. So yeah, I mean, and that's basically what I do.
I mean, that's a lot.
And I'm running this place, Streamland.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
residential recording studio.
I've seen the photos. It looks gorgeous. I mean,
Amazing place. People come up. They come from wherever they come. We just had a band. It was like the guys in the band Goose.
yeah.
One of them is making a solo. They were up here. I think so it's not a Goose record, but I think they're going to come in and do their record here. And we had Pat Metheny.
Wow.
Here, who happens to live in Woodstock.
Oh.
And Pat's worked here before. He was here years ago with Herbie Hancock and Yo-Yo Ma. The Goo Goo Dolls were here last year for 3 months working on a record. We've got, it's a phenomenal facility. People love, people come here. It's just an awesome place.
That's great. Well, Jerry, I could go on all day. I suggest that people, if they just want to know more about you, go to your website and just look at the discography, if anything else, because there's not many people that, have played with Hall & Oates and recorded with a band like, I think Yeasayers on there. That's an album that I really like, that I forgot about. And just the arc of your career is just a tremendous thing to even just look at. I can only imagine being that guy. But yeah, Security Project, people should check it out. You got some shows coming up, Daryl's House Club, I think Sellersville, Pennsylvania as well. And yeah, Jerry,
the Iridium in New York.
The Iridium. Oh, I didn't realize about the Iridium.
Doing the Iridium. I don't know. Ram's Head in Annapolis.
Yeah,
it's all it's all over the place. It's easy.
Good.
My website, the Security Project Facebook page, websites. You can, if you want to come see us, it's easy enough to find us.
Yeah. All right, Jerry, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
All right. Be good.
You too.